Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So today we're doing something a little bit different from usual. We're going to take a look at the higher value cards coming in Darkwing Blast and attempt to figure out where the prices are going to settle at around a month or so after the set officially drops. Obviously, before the set has released, prices are going to be super inflated. That's not to say that everything in the set is going to drop in price, but as a general rule, it's pretty safe to say that overall prices are going to go down from where they are now. Now, I don't want you guys to be paying more than you have to early on, because for a lot of us, I think we're okay with waiting an extra week or two to be able to purchase a card for half of what it was on release. Now, of course, take these with a grain of salt because I'm making estimations based on similar cards that we've seen in the past, but of course the format is always changing and we can never take 100% of those factors into account. But hopefully you guys find some of these comparisons and discussions to be useful for when you attend your sneak peeks this weekend. So let's get started. The first card we're looking at here is Spellbound, the world premiere quick play spell card. This is a really cool card that a lot of people are super hyped up about, calling it the replacement for Dimensional Barrier because it can also prevent your opponent from going into Link monsters. However, this card is definitely not a perfect comparison. It only prevents your opponent from using monsters currently on the field as material. So if your opponent puts other monsters onto the board, those can still be used for an extra deck summon. Also, it's only on the field, so against Tyramids, this doesn't stop them from fusing out of the graveyard. Honestly, it's going to be a bit weird to use this card because the timing for activating it is going to need to be very specific, and it will depend on how the format shapes up. It does feel like, in a lot of cases, Dimensional Barrier is going to be a better card, even though it only hits one type of summoning. It is a blanket effect for the entire turn, and it also negates the effect of monsters that are already summoned. Current pre-order prices are around $30 to $40, but I think that the card will fall out quite a bit as people realize that the card is outclassed the majority of the time by other options. People are still going to try to hype it up and use it in different ways though, so I think that in the end, Spellbound should settle at around $15 to $20 per copy. Next up, we have Sprite Sprint. This is a really good card for the Sprite deck, allowing you to dump a level 2 monster from your deck to the graveyard. Now, this is actually a really important extra deck piece for Sprite, because it seems like a lot of people are choosing to play the Nimbler engine now after the ban list, and they're using Sprint to dump Angler in order to summon 2 Beavers out of the deck. That being said, Sprint is an important card for the Sprite deck now, but it is unfortunately just a one-of in the extra deck. It's definitely not anywhere as important as Sprite Elf, which I think is arguably the most important card in the Sprite extra deck. Looking at pre-order prices now, Sprint is currently sitting at about $30 a piece, which is fair because Sprint is such a good monster for the deck. However, we do have to keep in mind that this card is just a one-of, and the fact that Sprint doesn't have any applications at all outside of Sprites means that this card should be much cheaper. I do think that this card should be in the single digits, but there isn't really a money card in the Secret Rares of Darkwing Blast at all, so that's going to push everything else up just a little bit. Overall, I'm going to put Sprint right at the $10 mark. I could maybe see it going as high as $15 if Sprint is really able to push sprites over the top and the deck does better than expected against a Shizu Tyramind. Next, we have Tyramids Rule Kalos. This card is a new bots monster for Tyramids requiring Kick Kalos and another Tyramids monster as material. However, while Kaleido Heart spun back an opponent's card and was meant for going second, Rule Kalos can negate an opponent's effect to special summon a monster and destroy it. Now, this is still an important card for the deck, though it is of course just a one-of here again as well. However, we do all expect Tyramids to be a tier 0 strategy with the Ishizu cards, so there will be players who are looking for this card, but Tyramids won't depend on Rule Kalos as much as Sprite players are going to be depending on Sprint. Current pre-order prices are very similar to Sprint, so around that $20 to $30 price range. I'm fairly certain that the drop in price will be very, very similar as well, and so I expect Rule Kalos to be around the $8 to $10 mark. The next one is Lady Labyrinth of the Silver Castle, a support card for Labyrinth, the deck that I'm currently playing. This is actually a really great card for the strategy. If a Labyrinth card or effect or a trap card were activated this turn, then you can special summon this card from your hand in defense position as a quick effect for free, and then when a normal trap is activated, you can set any other normal trap card with a different name directly out of the deck to your field. There is a lot that you can do with this, especially in the mid game when your traps are live during your own turn, since that means that you can proc Lady's effect right away and set the correct trap for your opponent's turn. I'm really excited for this card, but I think that because I'm playing the deck in all collector's rares, I probably need to pick these up in Starlight. Definitely going to be hurting my wallet. Anyways, as much as the deck is really fun and it's cool, it probably will struggle to deal with Ishizu Tearlament, and unless we're like really lucky a bunch of times, I don't expect this deck to compete with other meta decks extremely well, and the card's pre-order price does reflect this, as despite being a 2 to 3 of, the pre-order price is only about $15. It should continue to drop a bit further, though obviously there's not much room with such a low price point, so I'm expecting this card to be anywhere from $5 to $10. If you're playing Labyrinth, despite having to pick up a secret rare card, this should still be reasonably affordable. Next, we have a pretty disappointing secret rare to pull. It is Muckracker from the Underworld. I remember when we first saw this card revealed, I was like, oh my god, it's another tour guide iteration, but I read the card, I was pretty underwhelmed by its effect, and now it turns out they've gone ahead and made it a secret rare. The card itself isn't horrible, right? But it's only useful for Fiend decks, as the effects only interact with Fiend monsters. The main effect that seems good is that you can discard a card to special summon a Fiend monster from your graveyard, and that discard is a part of the card's effect, not a cost. So it does trigger the effects of Dark World monsters, and Dark Worlds happen to be Fiends with a structure deck coming out at the end of the year. Outside of that though, I don't really see any decks that would be looking to use this card. Pre-order prices are already pretty cheap at around $8 to $10. I had this card as being worth $5, but I put here $5 to $10 because I actually do think that Dark World players will run this in a couple of months, and even though Dark Worlds shouldn't be too meta relevant, they will still be popular and accessible enough that people will pick up copies of Muckracker to run, and that will drive the price up in the long run. Next up, this is Ignis Phoenix, the Draco Slayer. This is actually a really cool card for the Draco Slayer deck. Its main use is that when it is destroyed by battle or card effect, even while it's in your Pendulum scale, you get to summon a Draco Slayer or Ignite monster directly from the deck. Pendulums have lots of ways to pop their own scales, and getting out a Luster Pendulum or Master Pendulum that you can use for a Synchro, Xyz, Link, or Fusion play is really cool. This card is definitely a 3 of for Pendulum decks now. Currently, the range of pre-order prices for this card is a bit wide, with lows of around 15 and highs of around 30. Some people are talking about how crazy this deck is going to be because the deck was so popular over in the OCG, but they have Electromite and we don't, so I don't think the deck has the same power here as it does over there. I do think the card will be another card that settles between $10 to $12 as a good card for a deck that has a lot of potential, but that deck probably won't see very much competitive success here at all. If Draco Slayer Pendulums really pop off and they surprise everyone, this card could hit like $15, $20, maybe $25, but that does seem unlikely given the inconsistent performance and history of Pendulum decks in the TCG without Electromite. Next is Blazing Cartesia the Virtuous. So this card is supposed to be kind of like the next iteration of Ecclesia, and to be fair, the card art here is absolutely beautiful. I'm thinking that this card is going to look amazing as a Euro print. However, I don't really know how viable this card would be, because I don't know how exactly you have room to fit it into a branded Despia deck and have this card play a significant role. This card allows you to conduct a fusion summon for a level 8 or higher fusion monster during the main phase as a quick effect, so during you or your opponent's turn, which on the surface is really cool, but it actually seems kind of unnecessary and not that useful if you think about it. I don't think this card sees any play in any of the OCG lists, and I don't really see a place for this card. I think I'd rather have something else in hand or on the field a lot of the time. Pre-order prices are currently just around $20 to $25, much cheaper than its predecessor in Ecclesia. I think a lot of people see the same issues with this card's viability. It does have potential applications, and because this card's a waifu, I don't think it's going to go down into the single digits, but it's another card that shouldn't be any more than $10, maybe $15. Alright, we have the big one here. It is the Bestial Lubellion. This is obviously a Bestial secret rare, and it is a very good card. You can summon it from hand or graveyard by tributing a level 6 or higher Dark Dragon monster, and you can also discard it from your hand to search for a Bestial monster from your deck, so it basically searches for any monster in the archetype. Now, the Bestial cards are very, very good. A lot of players in the OCG main and side them as additional copies of DD Crow that also put bodies onto the board. However, none of them actually run Lubellion. I believe they splash Magnemite and the other 2 supers, but I didn't see any tournament lists that actually use Lubellion. I do think this card would be used if you were playing like a pure dragon deck with a bigger dragon engine, maybe one that was closer to Dragon Link or the Dragon Maid cards or something like that. I don't think Bestial Lubellion we'll see play in any of the upcoming Tyramids lists, or with any of the players that are splashing in Bestials into their strategies as additional hand traps. However, Lubellion is still actually the most expensive secret rare in the set, because it's a 3 of, and it's arguably the 3 of that has the most meta potential out of all of the secret rares. Right now the card is quite up there at around $50 to $60 on pre-order. I definitely don't think that that price tag is justified. I think 30 to 40 is much more realistic. This card kind of reminds me of Therion King Regulus, a card that everyone really thought was like money early on because it was a 3 of for a potentially really good deck, but then ended up not being much more than like a good piece of some average decks, and it ended up tanking in price, and I think Lubellion's going to go the exact same way. Second last secret rare here, and it is Glimp, Spear of the Goatee. Honestly, I don't even want to talk about this one, guys. It's just so disappointing. Like, it's not even as good as the last secret rare card. I actually think that the ultra rare in this set is so much better than this card too. I don't know why they made Glimp a secret rare. At least the artwork's kind of cool. Anyways, this wave of Goatee support had some cool things, but ultimately it's not enough to make the deck good, so don't expect the deck to do anything this format. Currently, we have the pre-orders for this card at like $5, but really I think it's unlikely that this card is worth anything more than $1 or $2. Alright, the last secret rare from the set here is World Sea Dragon Z Lantus. This is kind of an interesting card as a Link 4 monster that only requires 1 material to make, which means that you can special summon it using an Appaloosa that has burnt all of its negates. This card is kind of cool, allowing you to, during your main phase, banish all monsters on the field, and then special summon back those monsters right after. Seems kind of useless, but this card could potentially help you to reposition the monsters on your board if you have some Link arrows that are going kind of weird. And it also helps to trigger effects that happen on summon. So for example, if you had an Aluber that was on the board from last turn and it wasn't destroyed, you could proc its effect again using the effect of Lantus. I guess this card is kind of neat. I don't know too many decks that would actually be willing to use it right now. I think that I saw a Draco Slayer Pendulum list that was using it because Ignis Prominence isn't a hard once per turn effect, so you can trigger it with this. Overall, I think that this card is a very situational Link 4 monster that won't see a ton of meta play outside of some really niche strategies, so it should be relatively cheap. It's currently around $12 to $15 for the pre-order. I don't expect it to be maybe more than like $5 to $7, maybe $10. Okay, so we've talked about the secret rares, but there are 2 other cards I really want to talk about because I think they're probably like 2 of the top 3 or 4 cards in the set. The first one is Destructive DaRuMa Karma Cannon, the new TCG exclusive trap card. This one's absolutely insane. I think it's my favorite card from the set overall. It lets you change as many possible monsters on the field into face down defense mode, and then any players that control monsters that are face up afterwards have to send those monsters to the graveyard. Now, this is a really specific wording because it means the owner is sending the card to the graveyard, not DaRuMa Dharma Cannon, right? So it gets around cards that are unaffected by card effects, and it doesn't trigger things that activate when sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect either. This just has like so many applications because you can use it to get rid of difficult boss monsters on established boards, or you can also use it to force your opponent's monsters face down mid combo while also sending all of their links to the graveyard. This is one of the craziest TCG exclusive cards that we've seen in a long time, and I expect to see it in a lot of people's side decks, maybe even main decks. The pre-orders for this card are only like $10, which is definitely way too cheap. I personally think the value of this card is going to be at least $20, maybe even like $30, given how little value I expect a lot of the secret rares to hold from this set. I don't think this is unrealistic. I did put a low end of $5 here because I do think it's possible that like I'm just completely wrong about this card and it's going to tank. But if I were a betting man, I would buy a ton of copies of this card at only $10 a piece, because this is a card that has an insane amount of potential, and I expect players to realize that within the first event or 2 after the card is legal, and it's definitely going to spike considerably higher than the $10 mark it's currently at. And finally, the last card we have to talk about here is Tira Fenrir. So I think absolutely everyone was shocked to find out that Fenrir is an ultra rare and not a secret rare, especially when you consider the card's impact over in the OCG. Over there, Fenrir is absolutely a staple at 2 or 3. Everyone is running multiple copies because it's just like such a broken card that doesn't require anything else to function. It's a free special summon that searches for another copy of itself for your following turn, and it also banishes an opponent's face-up card face down for free just by attacking, right? Absolutely ridiculous. On top of that, it is a big body, it's a level 7. If this card were a secret rare, we'd be talking about this card as being the money card of the set. Over $100 easily, right? For whatever reason, Konami decided to make this an ultra, which is a blessing for all of our wallets, really. This is definitely going to be a game-changing card for the format, but it's honestly also probably going to be the most highly sought after card in the set. Honestly, despite being an ultra, I don't think I'm crazy to say that this will be the most expensive card in the set as well. The pre-sales are looking pretty reasonable at $25 to $35, but at that price, right, I look at it and I'm like, I think I would still buy it because it's just like such a good card, and then you see that the card is actually sold out on those pre-sale sites at those prices, which is kind of nuts. So yeah, I'm predicting $40 here because that's a really solid price point, but to be honest, if you told me in 2 months that Fenrir was $50, I would probably still believe you. Keep an eye out for this card at your sneak peek because this is definitely going to be one of those cards that absolutely everyone is going to be after. Okay guys, that is all I have for today's episode. I don't know, overall, I'm not too big on like Darkwing Blast as a set in terms of like price-wise. I think there's a lot of really good stuff and I'm looking forward to owning the cards, but if we're strictly looking at earning back the cost of your box in card value, I think there's going to be a lot of difficulty given what the secret rares in the set are. That being said though, definitely a fun set to open if you want to find support for a lot of different strategies, or maybe gamble and see if you can snag that Fenrir and DaRuMa cannon, because those cards are definitely going to be staples in the future. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's episode, please make sure that you let me know by slamming that thumbs up button for me. Also make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you guys think about Darkwing Blast and what cards you guys are looking forward to pulling at your sneak peeks this upcoming weekend. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button to get all of the latest and greatest content from both Combox and myself here on the channel. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.